Welcome to the Billy Ball panel at the Oakland Public Library. My name is Steve Lavoie. I'm a librarian at the Oakland Public Library. I've helped coordinate this program. This is to recognize it. It's kind of backwards, but you'll see the book. It's Billy Ball by Dale Tafoya. Tonight we have Michael Norris, former pitcher from those great years. Billy Martin Jr., Billy's son. Dave Newhouse, legendary Oakland sportswriter and a really good guy, and the author himself are all on the panel today to discuss this book and talk about the glorious days of Billy Ball in Oakland. And they're particularly historic because Billy pretty much completely transformed that franchise. Dale's writing in his book that in 1979, he discovered the significance of Billy Martin on the Oakland team when he was investigating, researching a game that took place on April 17th, 1979, in which 653 people attended the game. Needless to say, the A's were in a desperate state economically. And I can guarantee you there's probably 30,000 people who said they were at that game. And there was 653 people. Just like there were 35,000 people claimed to have been at the Catfish Hunter Perfect game in 1968 when there were only 6,500 people or something in the stadium. But anyway, and the other thing this is significant too, because it's kind of timely, because the A's, as you know, have abandoned the radio. And when the season ever starts, they're going to be broadcasting only streaming on the internet. This book, sort of the era of Billy Ball, begins with the A's without a radio contract. They were broadcasting on they had to broadcast on the college station at UC Berkeley, and some of my friends were working at the radio station at the time. So it was very exciting for them, but it was very annoying for the rest of us. Anyway, so I'm going to turn it over to Dale Tafoya, and we're going to have an exciting evening tonight. If you have questions, please add them to the Facebook question area, and we will deliver them to the panelists. And welcome to the panel. Thanks.
Great to be here. And you know, Stephen, what really intrigued me and compelled me to explore the story as I was digging into the bowels of Oakland A's history is this renaissance I saw with the A's from 1980 to 1982. In 1979, the A's drew just under 307,000. By 1982, the A's had drawn over 1.7 million. And during that time, Billy Martin was managing the A's. Not only that, all 6 farm clubs were in first place by the time he left. And the A's farm clubs were bankrupt in 1979. So that's all captured in the book. And just me wanting to capture this renaissance required me to study Billy Martin.
Dave, do you have anything to say about the A's at that period when you were covering them or writing about them for the Trib?
I became a columnist during that season. It was just, Sal Bando called it the Oakland Mausoleum. There were such few numbers of people there. But, being the oldest person on the panel, I first saw Billy Martin in the late 40s. I was a kid about 10, and we lived in the peninsula then at Menlo Park. But my dad brought me over, because we had relatives in Oakland, to see an Oaks game. And Casey was the manager, so it had to be 48, and I was 10 years old. And Billy was on first base. I'll never forget this. And, I didn't know much about baseball. I was just a fat little kid. And I'm sitting there, and he steals second base, and somebody must have yelled something at him, because I think the shortstop was Lou Stringer or somebody like that from Hollywood Stars, the LA Angels. Billy got on top of that guy, hit him about 20 times, and they pulled him off, and they threw him out of the game, and Casey walked him off the field. And I thought, this is supposed to be baseball, not boxing. You know, I was just a kid. And I thought, wow, what a fighter. And the next thing I know, Casey's managing the Yankees the next year, and they become the only team in baseball history to win 5 consecutive World Series from 49 to 53. And a lot of that was prolonged by Billy, who came up like 2 years after Casey did. And then, I don't know if people remember this, but it's a famous moment in Yankee history. They're playing the Dodgers in the World Series, and the bases are loaded, and Jackie Robinson is up. And he hits a high pop fly, and nobody's moving because it's right over the middle of the infield. And all of a sudden, Billy comes running in from second base, sticks out his glove underhanded, and caught the ball and ran into the dugout. And the Yankees won the game, and they won the series. If that ball drops, 2 runs are going to score for sure, and the Dodgers might have won that game and the series. But those were early instances of my seeing the kind of competitor that Billy was, someone who would fight for everything he felt he deserved, and it led to a legacy.
And that legacy.
Would you like me to keep?
That legacy includes Michael Norris, and Mike, you got some fan mail here in the chat here. So nice. Suzanne Lee says, "Mike, I love you so happy to see you. It's been way too long." So
great.
Can we have a few words from you, Mike?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank God for having me to be a part of this with such wonderful people on this panel and yourself. And it's really great to be a part of this. I'd like to thank Dale for having me to be a part of this as well. He could have chose a numerous amount of people to do this, and he chose me. So I'm really appreciative of it.
Welcome.
So Dale, you want to just sort of, maybe you want to just sort of start and tell us a little bit about what you discovered about Billy Ball when you were writing the book?
Yeah, just the like I mentioned, the renaissance that the A's had during that period, but also just learning about Oakland baseball. And this Billy Ball is really a story about Oakland baseball. If you remember, and Dave Newhouse touched on this, Billy Martin starred for the Oakland Oaks in 1948 under Casey Stengel, who later took him to New York. And he led the Oakland Oaks to their first Pacific League title since 1927. And it really sparked a civic revival post-Depression and everything in the Oakland area. And Billy did it again, managing the A's in 1980, and did the same thing with Oakland. And as I talk to different radio stations, I tell them when Billy Martin was managing the Twins, actually Billy Martin ended his career with the Minnesota Twins. And Billy Jr., he knows this, and he hung on there as a coach. But even in Minnesota, he knew Charlie Finley was going to move the Kansas City A's to Oakland. And he always eyed that managerial spot in Oakland. That was his hometown. And he was monitoring the construction of the Oakland Coliseum in the 60s. And Finley finally was able to bring him after the marshmallow incident in Minnesota, and George Steinbrenner fired Billy. Finley was finally able to hire him on February 21st, 1980 in Chicago. The story is Finley didn't renew his $200 business license in California. So the press conference to hire Billy was held at the Drake Hotel in Chicago on February 21st, 1980. So just little stories like that. But really this is a great Oakland baseball book because Billy Martin was born in West Berkeley, grew up on the James Kinney ballpark, and is a local boy. And although he was addicted to the Yankees, and Billy Jr. will tell you, he played a major significant role in Oakland baseball with the A's when he managed the A's those 3 years.
Here's a question for you from the audience. In your research for the book, Dale, did you discover anything that surprised you?
I think that, yeah, that Billy Martin was really in, and this is he got this from Casey Stengel, was really into psychology. Billy Martin read a lot of psychology books, and he really knew how to motivate different players. Maybe he would spark fear in one player, or motivate by encouraging another player, but he really used psychology in leading his men. He knew how to lead men, and Casey Stengel taught him that. Billy Jr.
Could I say something about that? Because
Absolutely.
Hi, Billy.
I'll never forget, I was sitting in the clubhouse with Dad, and Ricky Henderson's hamstring was bad. And the trainer's going over the kind of team report with him. You know, this guy's arm's bugging him. I wouldn't pitch him today. And he gets to Ricky and he says, Ricky's hamstring's so bad, I wouldn't play him. And so Dad gets up and walks into the training room and puts his hand on Ricky's back. And, pal, the trainer doesn't think I should play you today. And Ricky says, oh, no, I'm your guy, Skip. He says, you're damn right you're my guy, and I need you all year, and we got an off day tomorrow. So if we rest you, you know, you get 2 days off. And he says, no, man, I'm your guy. Just let me cruise. Let me cruise. And Dad stopped for a minute. He had his hand on his back. He said, all right, pal, but I need you all year. Be careful. And we walked out, and I said to my father, I said, Dad, that was kind of cool. I hadn't seen that side of him. And he said, look, they're all different. Some of them need a little love. Some of them need a kick in the ass. Some of them I don't need to say a word to. And that's my job to try to figure that out.
That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
May I add something to that?
Absolutely.
Mike, he didn't have to say a word to, right?
I was there with maybe that transpired right after, and he maybe the next day or so, and he told Ricky, came up to Ricky, he said, you know, Ricky, I have a choice of playing you or not. He said, but you're probably not even 75%. He said, but your 75% is the other guy's 100%. And I stood back and I went, wow, that was some psychology there for you, boy, right there. And, you know, Ricky went along with it, and he didn't get hurt. He made it through it. But I thought that was just very impressive, very impressive. Right. So I didn't know Billy studied psychology, though. So for sure he did. He was a master at it, for sure.
Right.
I mean, he got the best out of me with that.
Right. Got it from Stengel.
Well, I'm guessing Mike was one of those guys he didn't have to say a word to.
No, he didn't. We had an interesting. You weren't there earlier before you got in here. I was telling about the story. The first day that he came to spring training, and he was telling everyone that sometimes you players screw over the coaches. And he said, if you screw over me, I screw back harder. And so you could hear a pin drop in the clubhouse. And I looked around, and some of the guys' faces were just like, and so I don't know what made me start laughing. I started busting up laughing. And I'm the only one laughing. And he looks over at me and said, Mr. Norris, I want to see you after the meeting. I'm going, oh my God. 6 minutes into the darn meeting, I'm already in trouble the first day. So I go into his office after the meeting was over with, and he says, close the door. And I go, oh boy. And I'm thinking maybe we're going to fight, you know? And so he says, sit down. So I sat down. He says, so now what was so damn funny? I said, I don't know, but I just looked at everybody's face and stuff and see how everybody was so scared, and it made me laugh. He said, well, you weren't afraid? I said, no, sir, because I'm not trying to screw you around. He looks at me he said, wow, I could see his mind going, that was a good answer. And he says, all right, get out of here and go out there and work your ass off and have a good time. And I said, great. So that's Billy, man. That's Billy. He was great with that.
We got a question. And I know this is one of the controversies about Billy was the way he used his pitchers. And there's a question that says, they're wondering if Mike or any of the other starters were resentful of the way they were used, seemingly without regard for preserving their careers, because, as Billy didn't like his bullpen much. So I'm just wondering how you feel about that.
Me specifically, when you're a kid, you pitched 9 innings, you completed the game. So that was my thing. I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think it was overwork, because you don't want to come out of the game anyway. And true, we didn't have the greatest bullpen in the world, but sometimes you think, okay, well, me being fatigued, I might be as good as the guys in the bullpen. And so I always stayed in the game, and then about, he would come out and ask how you felt about the 8th or 9th inning, and then he'd have that look on your face, like if you say you're tired, you give you that look. And then I'm fine, Billy, I'm fine. So about halfway during the season, he'll come out, and I said, Billy, get the hell out of here before you even get out to the dirt. And he looked at me, put his hands in his back pocket, turned around and went back to the dugout. And that was the last time he had to come out and ask me, was I tired? So that was great, man.
That's because Mike's 75% was probably 110% of the bullpen.
I didn't want to say that, Billy, but that was pretty much it.
Well, this is Dave Newhouse. I remember one game Langford went 14 innings,
Right.
and I can't remember. I think maybe the A's lost, and we were in Billy's office after the game, and I said, Billy, could you have pulled? I saw this Spacey Lacey guy warming up in the bullpen. It was Bob Lacey. They called him Spacey Lacey. Then he thought of bringing him in. He looked at me like I was crazy. Oh, and so he did pitch those guys a lot of innings. But when you think back to Billy Ball, it's the only time I can remember looking at a baseball team really without denigrating anybody, without an infield. It was pitching and that outfield, Armas, Henderson, and Murphy. And that's when Billy came up with stealing home. I mean, it was so exciting. I remember Wayne Gross was stealing home. He looked like a fullback coming down, and he made it work. He pulled out all the ingenuity that he could think of to make that team productive. And that was the year of the strike, but the A's made the playoffs because they had the best record of the first half of the season. But it was those outfield guys, offensively and defensively, good catching, outstanding pitching, and I can never remember a time when a championship team looked like it didn't have an infield. It was the strangest thing.
Good point, Dave. Good point.
Hey, Mike, is there? Can you speak to with the young starting pitchers, you, Langford, Keogh, McCaddy, that Kingman, you guys were proven pitchers, and you guys were receiving so much attention. The Sports Illustrated cover in 1981, and it's not like you guys were proven pitchers. I talked to Steve McCaddy, and you guys did not want to give up the ball. I mean, you guys were having the time of your lives, and not only did you guys want to stay in the limelight, you were just trying to keep a spot on that Oakland A's staff.
It became competitive, but we didn't ever say it amongst ourselves. But you would have a winning streak, right? Out of the 3 starting Matt, Langford, myself, and then it got to McCaddy and Kingman, and then they had enough heart that they didn't want to be losers. So it was just, we had that competition going, unspoken competition going amongst us, and that was great. That really was. And for me too, I remember I pitched a 10-inning game in Toronto and lost, and I was the 5th starter at the time. And when the game was over, I went into the bathroom, and you must have heard bang, boom. I took a bat in there with me, and I tore up that bathroom. And when I came out of the bathroom into the clubhouse, and everybody was just looking at me like I had lost my mind. But Billy had this look on his face of admiration. He looks at me, he goes, Michael Norris, you're the ace of my staff now. And if you could have seen Keogh's face, they couldn't believe it. And so from then on, I was the ace of the staff. So that's the kind of guy Billy was. He loved the fact that I hated to lose because he hated to lose. And that rubbed off on him.
How did Matt Keogh take that though? Didn't he feel kind of like he got the rug pulled out from under him?
Exactly. That was the look he had on his face. Exactly.
But did he hold the grudge though?
No. I mean, everybody had kind of seen me kind of transform and it kind of really earned it. You know what I'm saying? My athletic ability was second to none. And now I had put it together on the mound. So I became pretty much a complete pitcher.
You know, knowing Dad, he'd already made that decision probably a week or so before. And that was the perfect moment for him to say, see this? Look how much this guy hates to lose. That's my kind of guy. You're now number one. He'd already made his mind up, but it was the perfect way to say, Mike, you're the guy.
You understood your dad well, did you?
No, absolutely. I knew when to ask for $20 and when not to say a word.
So I got another question, and this just to open it up to everybody. And as an old time A's fan, I know this very well. That at this end of the '72, at the playoffs in '72, you know, Billy was managing the Tigers when we had that wonderful little dust up in Detroit when Campy Campaneris threw the bat at Laren LeGros.
Yeah, I remember that.
I'm wondering if anybody, if that was that, if somebody's asking, was that part of the dugout conversation when Billy came to the A's, or was it water under the bridge by then?
I had never heard anything about it. No. But Campy would have been the kind of guy that Billy would have loved for him to play for him, though.
True. Yeah. And then just since we're going through the chat, let me just see if there's another one here. Somebody's asking about Cliff Johnson. Does anybody have a Cliff Johnson story?
He fought Goose Gossage.
Mike's got several.
Oh God, I don't know. Let me see.
Well, while Mike's thinking about that,
what? I'm pitching in Cleveland.
Oh, yeah.
We were in Cleveland, and that's when Cliff was with the Indians at the time. And I think I was pitching pretty well, and I don't know how I came out of the game early because that was one of the games I obviously didn't complete. That might have been there. That might have been the year before Billy got there. So I think I went 7 innings, and I come out, and I got Cliff out pretty much the whole day. And I think I laughed at him the last time I got him out. So I'm in the clubhouse, and all of a sudden the phone rang, and the clubhouse guy goes, "Yeah, he's here," and he gives me the phone. And it's Cliff, and he goes, "You little MF, the next time you try to show me up, as a matter of fact, I'm coming over here to kick your little ass." And he comes over to the clubhouse. And I'm like terrified because Cliff is a big man, okay?
Right.
And so he goes, you didn't think I'd come over here, huh? I'm gonna let you go, but you better remember next time, don't show me up like that. And ever since then, when he got to the ball club, he was like my boon cool, man. That was Cliff. Cliff was a great guy. Great guy.
That's good.
Hell of a hitter, too.
He was one of the scariest looking guys, Cliff Johnson. You know, I had this feeling if I hadn't eaten in a week and Cliff Johnson hadn't eaten a week and somebody threw a sandwich on the table, I'd give it to him. He had a scowl on his face, and he was a big guy. You know who he reminds me of? Did you ever see the movie Major League with Tom Berenger and Charlie Sheen and that first baseman, the mojo guy? The mojo guy who was always striking out, and he was always talking to these mojo gods in his club. I can't think of in his locker cubicle, and that guy looked just like Cliff Johnson. And then in the big game, he hit one out. Cliff Johnson was a great pinch hitter, though. I mean, he was productive for the A's coming off the bench, but he could have that sandwich. He certainly could.
I think he was our right-handed DH. I think he was more than a pinch hitter. He you know, I don't know who was left-handed.
Maybe that was it.
Yeah, he was the DH, man, and he might have led the club in home runs if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right. He produced.
Yes.
Yeah.
He did.
Joe Boo is the player you're referring to, and
Jobu, right? Okay.
Yeah,
good.
Joe Boo, yeah.
and Cliff was not only a guy like that who could take that role, but he was another guy who understood my father and kind of was, I don't know, would you call him one of Dad's enforcers, Mike? I mean, a guy that would maybe work the sideline a little bit.
That was one of his purposes for sure. He was,
Absolutely.
you know, no doubt, like Mr. Newhouse said, he was definitely intimidating looking. So that was basically it, pretty much. You know, I never looked at it like that, but yeah, now that I look back on it, that's for sure. That made a lot of sense for sure.
Didn't Billy bring him from the Twins with Harmon Killebrew, or when Killebrew came out to do the TV, didn't Cliff come to the A's to follow Billy?
Yeah, they signed him in '82, I believe, from the Yankees. I believe.
Yeah, right. But I mean, I think Billy had something, and he play with him in Minnesota or something.
Cliff was there in '81.
But I know he was a Yankee.
Cliff was there in '81.
Okay.
Yeah, he was there. I remember that vividly because the playoff game we had with the Yankees that year with the strike shortened season, and it was '81.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Here's a question that's sort of like generally you guys can talk about it probably. What do you think, would Billy's management style work in today's baseball era with analytics and Bruce Bochy and sabermetrics and all the other stuff? What do you think?
Okay.
Well, actually, Billy was doing a little analytics at the time. I mean, we had some awesome meetings between the pitchers and before the game, whoever the starting pitcher was, he would come in his office, and you had the center fielder and the shortstop and the second baseman and the catcher in there. And he would know how to pitch everyone. And we were on a pitch count, and that pitch count stuff was earlier than most people were using. Now, yeah, we pitched the completed the game, but we were on a pitch count. I think I threw average about 115 pitches. I think Langford had about 105 average. Keel was right around 125. And then, you know, McCaddy was a hard thrower, so he got a lot of strikeouts, so he was up around 130. And so, yeah, but, you know, that I pitched a 14-inning game and only threw 155 pitches. So that's the way we rolled.
I get this a lot. People always say, oh, your father would have hated analytics. No, he would have loved analytics. The more information, the better.
That's it.
But knowing my father, and I know Michael backed me on this, he was still going to go with his gut in certain situations.
Right.
He could get all the analytics he wanted, and 3 or 4 nerds could come tell him, you got to do this, you got to do that. And he'd go, no, we're doing this right now. And that's, you know, that's what baseball's all about right now. Trying to figure out how do you mesh all those numbers and all this stuff, but also put it with the old school baseball knowledge of, you know what, here's the right move right now.
Interesting.
The hunch.
Right.
Speaking of the hunch, somebody's asking about Art Fowler. Anybody got any comments about Art?
I know Michael does.
Well, goddamn, buddy, that was his favorite phrase.
This pitching coach Art Fowler. Pitching coach Art Fowler.
Who's notorious for supposedly introducing foreign substances possibly to the balls and in his
No, you know what? That was not true. That was not true. He was trying to teach us the dry spitter, and it never worked for me. you just didn't hold the ball with the seams, that's all. And then you could turn it around to a 4-seam or 2-seam. And if you wanted it to sink, it sank. But I had a screwball, and everyone tried to confuse my screwball with a spitter because it went down so drastically. And I could change speeds on it. I threw it 3 different speeds. So I could throw a hard, and I had a medium one, and I had a slow one. And so, I'm not going to, maybe one of us was throwing a spitter, a real spitter, but I'm not going to call and see who it was. But the rest of us were just, and I'm sure no one else really threw it because Langford had one heck of a slider. McCaddy had a rising fastball on the slider. And Keeman probably had the best stuff out of all of us. He had 3 pitches that were just, but he just didn't have the control over him. So Billy would make him and McCaddy, once they got 2 balls and no strikes, he'd make them throw a fastball. So now everybody in the ballpark knows he's going to throw a fastball, and that's the problem Kingman had with him. He wouldn't let them throw breaking balls like he would let Langford and Keel and myself throw. So that was basically that.
Art was like an uncle to me, and because he not only did he follow my father around it everywhere he went, but he was the first Dad managed was the Denver Bears. Okay. And Art was the pitching coach / closer of that team. and think about that. Think about a team today having a pitching coach / closer at AAA, a 34-year-old guy. I think that's about how old he was. I may be wrong. And Dad, of course, brought him up with him the next year and just made him the pitching coach. But Art had a relationship with his guys that was special. And I watched it a lot. I would sit and watch you guys work and do your drills and do the running drills where he threw the ball to you guys. And it was neat. Y'all's relationship and everything, it was very unique. And the way he talked to Dad about you guys, he wouldn't rat you out, if something was going on. So there were times where I'd be watching and hanging out with the pitchers and seeing that, and then see he and Dad at a bar later that night.
Yeah.
And, Mike maybe had said, my knee's bugging me a little bit or whatever. And, Art defended y'all, but it was a fine line he had to ride because he was also Dad's pitching coach. And it was neat the way he handled it because he wasn't ever going to lie to Dad, but he would make things right. And I don't know, it was very unique, and
it's a word.
What a great guy.
That's a good word, unique. And you know what his asset was? Art was a comedian. He would tell jokes and he would just relax you, man. And I never will forget one time I had a control problem that day, and I think I had walked 2 people in a row, and then I got 2-0 and another guy, and all of a sudden I hear time out. And here he comes, that little run he had, a little wobbly body, and he comes out to the mound.
Hey, Bob.
I'm going back and forth up down the mound, landing where I'm landing. I'm checking to see if my footprint's over to the third base side, or am I pulling out or what? And I'm dumbfounded. And so Art gets to the mound. I said, Art, what am I doing wrong? He said, God damn, buddy, I don't know, but I'm going to tell you one thing. You're pissing Billy off. And I just started laughing like God really wanted to hear that. It relaxed me, man. I'll tell you, Art was a character, man. He was a character. Lord have mercy.
I got a great Art story because he would do that. He would just tell guys, I'm going to come out here and hang out with you because Billy is so pissed off. I'm going to stay out here. But one of the better ones I've ever heard, Dave Rigetti had just gotten a new contract with the Yankees, and he was struggling, and he just got a pretty big deal. And Art did his run out there and said, "Hey, buddy, how you doing?" You know, Forget he gives him a look and he says, "All that money you got now, you think you could buy you a curveball?" Just
Oh,
like,
God,
just
he
like
was great.
he was there. He was there to loosen you up a little bit.
That's what he did. That's what he did. You put it all back into perspective again after that. Yeah,
I
Art was
think
great.
Art Feller was someone like out of a novel. I mean, you'd watch after the game, he would dress up, he would have suspenders on, he'd have a tie, and he'd be putting aftershave lotion on that ruddy face of his.
Yeah.
And you look at him and you say, "Where's he going?" Just, there's games tomorrow. I guess he was going with Billy, but he looked like some guy out of a Damon Runyon novel in the 1920s. The way he dressed, he's kind of a pot-bellied guy, but he dressed up. Those suspenders and a tie and I watched him. I saw him put aftershave on his face, and I thought to myself, my God, this isn't Brad Pitt. Where is he going? And stuff like that. He lived, I think he's one of those guys who was a baseball lifer and lived it and loved it probably as much as anyone. But just like didn't he, Mike, in a way, Billy seemed like a character just straight out of a novel?
I mean, he was. And I got another great story. He played for DeRoche, I think, when he was with the Cubs or something, I think. And in Chicago that day, it gets real hot in Chicago in the summertime. And everybody kept complaining how hot it was. So DeRoche said, "The next son of a gun says how hot it is out here, I'm going to find him." And so Art had just come off the mound after an inning, and he sit down, he threw his glove down on the bench, and he said, "Damn, it's hot." And then he thought about it, he said, "Just like I like it." That was Art, man. He was great. He was great.
So we got a question here, since we're on pitchers. Somebody's curious about details about when Billy Martin caught Maury Wills, who was managing the Mariners, who was trying to change the dimensions of the batter's box while Rick Langford was pitching.
Great story.
I witnessed that. I was, between innings, Billy would go back into the out of the dugout and on the runway there, and he'd smoke a cigar, and then when innings started, he'd put it out and set it up on top of whatever. And for 2 innings, he kept looking at home plate. And then all of a sudden, he goes, "That son of a gun." He didn't quite say that. And he runs out to the umpire, and he had actually literally seen that Maury Wills had moved the batter's box up closer to home plate so that they could catch Ricky from stealing second base. And he saw that from over in the dugout. That was the most amazing thing I ever seen him do. I mean, that's how much he paid attention to details so much like that. It was incredible to me. I was in awe of that. How he saw that, I don't know. I mean, I guess he's seen millions of games and stuff, and I guess he could detect that. But to me, that was just totally amazing how he found that out. And they busted him on it. Yeah.
That's who he was, Mike. He was always that guy looking for that angle.
Good point.
He had to. When you guys talked about Casey bringing him up to the Yankees, it wasn't because he was such a great player, but he wanted his attitude. He wanted his grit. He wanted his brain in that dugout. And Dad was always looking for that angle. Mickey Mantle said it to me all the time. He said, "I knew your father was going to be a great manager because he was always seeing pitchers tip pitches and looking at something and going, oh, look where the second baseman is playing." And he'd run to Casey and say, "We can steal second. They won't even throw it down there." He had that ability because he needed it, because he was a 160-pound, 5'10" guy that hit 250 in the big leagues. Unless it was a World Series, then he hit 333.
Yep. Money player.
Yeah, I just have a question. This is a personal question that I've always wondered, because that team, that outfield that played in those years, I regard as one of the great outfields of all time. Not necessarily statistically, but just in terms of their ability to play baseball and to play the outfield. And I've always been curious about how Billy interacted with those guys. Tony Armas, Dwayne Murphy, and Ricky, I guess, was there most of the time, but various left fielders. Because there was a very unique outfield and very gifted.
I can interject on that. First of all, we had 3 center fielders out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the psychology, going back to the psychology on everything, this is how Billy kept the whole team in line. He let the outfield and myself and McCaddy, he let us kind of do what we wanted to do, and he treated us a little better than everybody. Okay, so you got that 4 or 5 up there. And then he had 2 whooping boys. He had Lacey and Shooty Babbitt. Okay. And so I guess everybody in the middle went, I'd rather be treated like those 4 or 5 guys instead of those 2 guys here. And that's how he kept everybody in line. That was an amazing concept right there. That was brilliant. Brilliant. That's how he worked it.
Interesting. Hey, Mike, so we talked about Art Fowler and Billy's coaches, and Billy loyalty, as we know, and Billy Jr. will say this, loyalty was very important to Billy, and he brought his coaches with him, and some people call them the cronies. How good were Billy's coaches, the Lee Walls, the Clete Boyers, the Jackie Moores that he brought to Oakland?
Well, you couldn't have had a better infield coach to teach guys how to play the infield than Clete Boyer.
Mm-hmm.
And Lee Walls was probably the hardest working coach I had ever played for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I and McCaddy used to like to go out during batting practice and run shag balls out in center field. And then one day, I don't know so he would hit the outfielders balls to the left and balls to the right and ground balls. So I hopped in the line one day. And I did this for about 2 weeks, and the next thing you know, McCaddy joined me. Then Langford joined me. And Keel joined me. And so we got half of the pitching staff out there. And what we would do, that's how we stretched out our arms. So we'd be in center field, and we throw it all the way into the left field foul line. And that's how we got our arms strengthened like that. And so we worked on running. So we got our running in because he'd run us to the left and run us to the right. And then we had charge and ground balls. Brilliant. So, that's how he worked everything. So, and of course, Art was great too. So his coaching staff, and you can't forget Jackie Moore either. Jackie Moore was cool. I love Jackie. Jackie was just cool. Okay.
Still
and
is,
so
man. He's still cool. I talk to him all the time, Mike.
yeah, he's doing great. Beautiful wife he had and everything. He was just cool. I mean, you can't say nothing that he was just cool. And so you had Lee Walls. Lee Walls was an enforcer type, and you had Art, who was a comedian, and Clete was a comedian. Okay, so it was a great coach.
Got George Mitterwall too. I forgot to mention.
Oh my God, George! George was also hilarious. So, but he kept the bullpen in line, though. He didn't have to do much, obviously, but he was the bullpen coach, and so those guys knew what to do and stuff. Everybody was in tune with everything. Billy had everything. Bam, 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 bam. So yeah, the coaching staff was great.
Mitterwall and Walls were with the team when Dad got there, and it was rare in his career that he kept a former coach. Because of that loyalty thing for him was so important, right, that he was always afraid if I keep one of his guys on my staff, is he going to stab me in the back? And he trusted them enough to keep them on staff and be loyal. And they all seemed, I never once heard him say a bad word about any of those 2 guys. I mean, obviously Clete was one of his guys. Art was one of his guys. Jackie was one of his guys. And you talked about analytics earlier. Jackie always had everybody's numbers right there on hand, ready to go. I mean, that was who Dad would look down to and say, if he had a question, if he didn't know, he was asking Jackie. What do you got on it?
Well, Jackie became a manager, so that just goes to show you his intellect right there.
Absolutely.
Great point, Billy. All right.
Now,
So-
Jackie's doing great. He's here in Texas, and I went to his birthday party. The Astros did a surprise. They got him completely. Nolan Ryan and Jackie are very close. They hunt together. Nolan's son, Reed, worked for the Astros as a president for the Houston Astros, and he asked Jackie to come down to speak to the season ticket holders. Jackie's rolling his eyes like, are you kidding me? My birthday? Okay, I'll do it for you, buddy. He and his wife drive all the way down to Houston from Arlington, Texas. It's a 5-hour drive.
Dang.
He walks out to speak to the season ticket holders, and he's looking around and it's all his friends. I was sitting in the crowd, and it was a happy birthday surprise. He had no idea it was all of us, and we were all there to see him. It was great.
Wow.
He's a great guy, Jackie Moore, man.
Yeah, he's definitely deserving of it, man. Definitely deserving of it. You tell Jackie hi the next time you see him, okay? I said hi.
Billy, do the same thing for me, Dave Newhouse. I always thought he was an above board guy.
Yeah, he was.
Can I say one thing about Billy? When I just got out of college and I went to work for the Oakland Tribune in '64, I was just working in the office basically. And in '65, before the A's came west, it looked like the Giants were going to play the Minnesota Twins in the World Series. So my sports editor, George Ross, said, why don't you fly back to Minnesota and get an impression of what it is the Giants are going to face when they get to the World Series. So I go back there, and they were, Harmon Killebrew, Bob Allison, they were all good guys. But I find out that Billy, who was a coach then, was basically running the team. The manager was Sam Mealy, and I still have a Sam Mealy for president campaign button that I got when I was back there. But it was Billy who was calling the shots, and in fact, he made Zoyo Versalles the American League's most valuable player that year. Versalles was a shortstop. He only hit about 270, but Billy made him into a great factor, all around defense, running, leadoff hitting, batting second, whatever it was. And so I got the impression right then that Billy was on his way to something more permanent, more spectacular.
Yeah.
Rod Carew was on that team too, and he helped Rod in so many ways. Not only teaching him to steal home, but talked to him about being a hitter, and told him, look, if you want to be a power hitter, you can be a 20 home run guy, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But if you tone it down a little bit, I think you could be a batting champion. And I think the Hall of Fame agrees that was the right call. He's also the godfather of Rod's daughter, and she's outstanding too.
Speaking of the Hall of Fame, I've got some questions in the chat group about how did people feel about Billy being in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, I think it's a slam. I think it's a slam dunk. You have to. Of course, Billy's personality might turn some people off, but wherever he went, he won. It reminds me of Dick Williams. Dick Williams, when he was the A's manager, and he left. When they had the great run, he won the first 2 World Series of that 3 World Series stretch where the A's won in the early 70s. Dick Williams won wherever he went. Mm-hmm. He knew the game, and there was something about him, and he finally got into the Hall of Fame. And I think Billy is most deserving of having his bust in Cooperstown, however you want to phrase it. He was a game changer.
Right.
And not only the wins, it's just the drawing power Billy had. When an owner brought Billy to manage his team, it wasn't just going to translate into the standings. Billy could fill that stadium, fill butts in that stadium. So he had this drawing power, and he just connected with the working class in every city he went. I mean, owners, if they were going to fire Billy Martin, they really had to consider the fans, because fans were going to protest, get boycotts, because he was so popular as well. And also just one of the characters in the game in terms of just this Hall of Fame argument.
Somebody's talking too about his famous the stumble at first double steal trick that he used to pull. Does anybody know? I mean, I know it's a legacy now with Billy, but where did that come from? Why did it continue to work season after season?
I don't know. That was it. You know why it worked? Because he would get the two most unlikely individuals that were on first and third to pull it off. So
Right.
it would catch the other team totally by surprise. That's the only way I can look at it. People like, I can remember Jeff Newman would really do it well.
Mm-hmm.
He'd get off first base and fall down, literally fall down, and the pitcher's looking at him like, whoa, there's my out. And then he would nonchalantly throw it up because Newman's on the ground and throw it to first base, and then boom, there goes Wayne Gross home. And it was perfect. It was just unbelievable. I don't think I saw it any more than 2 to 3 times. So it wasn't something to use often, but when he used it, it would catch people totally by surprise.
You know, I want to add something about Billy Ball. You know, my colleague at the Oakland Tribune, Ralph Wiley, was the one that came up with the expression. And then the A's marketing team, Andy Dulwich, they took it to the heights. But an inside story was that Ralph had written that in his column and then went back to the paper, and the guy on the desk was reading it, and he thought it sounded hokey, Billy Ball, and he was going to take it out. Ralph Wiley says, if you touch that, we're going to blows right now. And, you know, that never happened inside a newspaper. I mean, it wasn't a dugout, but it stayed. It stayed. If Ralph hadn't come back to the paper after writing it, if they'd have changed it, there might have been some blows thrown, but it wouldn't have been in the paper. But Ralph deserves all the credit for coming up with that magical phrase.
And
Ralph
people
Wiley,
remember that Ralph worked for the Tribune before he went on to fame and fortune elsewhere. But
Ralph Wiley was absolutely great. And he came up with a slogan for Rick Langford and I. He called us the two-headed monsters. I thought that was great. Yeah, so he's very innovative, very creative. Ralph Wiley, bless his heart.
Somebody mentioned you mentioned the owners Dulwich and those guys. Somebody's been in the chat. There's questions about how Billy got along with Charlie Finley, and also about how Billy got along with the Haas family ownership, because he did have a reputation of not respecting his owners very much. So just one.
Well, as far as Finley, it looks like from all accounts that they got along great. I mean, in 1980, Finley was finally able to sell that club in August of 1980 to the Haas family. So he kind of led Billy for only a few months there, but Finley just left Billy alone and let Billy do his magic. In fact, when Finley sold the team to the Haas's at the press conference at the Kaiser Center on August 23rd, 1980, Finley told everybody in the press conference that Billy Martin should be named manager of the century. So from all accounts, they got along well, and Billy did increase. And Billy Jr. would tell you he increased the value of that A's franchise in 3 months in 1980, and created so much interest in Oakland that the Haas family purchased the team. I mean, the Haas family, they were around in the late 70s. They could have purchased the team from Finley back then, but they didn't purchase the A's until Billy created this interest around Oakland in his first 3 months of the season in 80.
I just wonder, had they continued, had they had more time together, how it would have gone, because
Point.
Finley was such a hands-on guy.
Wow.
You know, notorious for calling into the dugout and doing
During
that.
the game.
Yeah. And
During
so,
the game.
and Mike knows how that would have gone with my father. And so
I wouldn't have lasted one day.
no, but Finley, man, Finley was wise beyond
Oh my God.
he ever got. I mean, people don't realize how good of a talent assessor he was. I mean, I wonder how good of a scouting director he would have been just handling the draft. He had a talent. Look at the staff he put together in you guys. I mean, he did have some talent. Look, what if the other owners had listened to him when the Players Association was talking about free agency, and Finley said to the whole world, fine, let's make them all free agents after every season. And the other owners looked at him like he was crazy, but it was brilliant if you really look at that, because, you know, if everybody's a free agent after every season, you're kind of going to get compensated for what you did. And so we signed the number 1 second baseman. Well, there's 29 more out there that are free agents. It would have been very interesting to see what that would have done. I'm going to say, as an agent, thank goodness nobody listened to him, because we wouldn't have these amazing long contracts we do today. But he was ahead of his time in lots of ways.
I got a quick Charlie Finley story to add on to that. The last year that he was there, obviously. And so I'd had a good year. So he calls me up in 81. He goes, Mike, I want you to listen to this one. How about you make me your agent? And he said, I know where to get the money. He said, we can go down the way there to the Singing Cowboy. And if he doesn't give us the money, then we can go a little further down to the Hamburger Man. So that was Croc. So Gene Autry, Croc, and he said, if we don't get the money there, then we'll go to the Paint Man. And that was the Philadelphia guy, DuPont. And he said, and last but not least, this will definitely work. We can go to the Shipbuilder. And that was Steinbrenner. I said, Mr. Philly, that sounds great. So I said, but I think that would be a little bit of a conflict of interest for me right there.
But Mike, that's when you knew Finley was selling, when he wanted to be your agent, right?
I put 2 and 2 together after that. I said, man, he must be bailing on this man right now, because he's already figuring out what another career to go into. But he knew about that money, and he cut my contract twice, 20%. Okay. So that year when I was going to arbitration, I was making $30,000. I asked for $500,000. The A's were offering $300,000. I lost the arbitration, but I became the first person in Major League history to make a 300% raise. So that was how Charlie was. So it was great. It was great. You had to respect him, man. He would give you that contract, right? And he would tell you, I think this is fair and equitable to both parties. It would always be fair and equitable to him. He was something else, man. He was something else. I loved him, though. I used to call him my white daddy. That's the kind of affection we had for one another. Yeah. Every time he would always, and not always, when we play in Chicago or go to Chicago, he'd show up and then he'd go, hey Mike, if you win me this game today, I'm going to get you a jacket just like mine. And he would have that And it's funny, after about 3 times, I would always lose. And so then he goes, Mike, if you win this game for me today, I'm going to get you a hat just like mine. And he had the crushed dreams. I said, Mr. Philly, don't give me no more nothing. I don't want nothing, because every time you offer that, I lose. And he just busted out laughing. So to get him to laugh was awesome, because he didn't ever show that side of himself. You know, he was always hard-nosed. But Mr. Philly was a great man. I really loved him. We had a really good relationship. Because that man took care of me after I blew my elbow out. He wouldn't let me pick up a baseball until the end of the season. He told me if I got caught throwing a baseball, for every foot it went, he would fine me $1,000. And I wound up throwing the ball left-handed in batting practice and stuff. You know, I wasn't, you know, we wasn't making that much money the first, but I'm adding up. I'm going $1,000 a foot. That'd be my own contract after about 2 weeks. So yeah, Mr. Philly was awesome, man. He was an awesome guy. I loved him.
Well, I think the Haas family, to answer the second part of that question, gave Billy more authority than he'd ever had before, because he had control of the draft, he had control of trades. He had worked himself up to the pinnacle at that point. And the Haas family is the most, you know, I've been doing this for 60-some years. I've never seen an ownership like that. And Mr. Haas himself, Walter Haas, finest owner I ever met in my life. Generous, non-assuming, quiet. Wasn't, you know, if he was the antithesis of Finley, who was in the paper every other day with some threat or something he was doing. You can never rest with Finley, but Mr. Haas, you never heard from. He was just he built that Levi empire into something that was incredible even today. But he was the finest man, and he gave Billy everything he ever wanted.
He was a very humble man to be as rich as he was. I mean, the guy made me a millionaire, so I love the guy. He was a great guy too. Great owner, yeah. Yep, the Haas family.
Look at, I mean, him giving that ability to my father to basically be manager and general manager, and what Dad did with it. What, you know, he added all those scouts, and a lot of people made fun of that because, right, Billy's just hiring a bunch of his drinking buddies, and yes, many of them were drinking buddies because they were old school baseball guys that were on the same page with my father. And what did that produce? It produced, that group of scouts produced 3 Rookie of the Years in a row in Canseco, McGuire, and Walt Weiss. And Dad doesn't get any credit for that. I mean, things like that, I hope the Hall of Fame one day will take into account also in his career, because, you know, how many managers get to do things like that, and look what it produced.
And Bill, you make a great point, because your dad brought in Camilo Pascual as a scout, and he played with Camilo in Minnesota. He brings Camilo in 1981. The next year in 82, Camilo was moving in Florida as a scout for the A's, and sees his skinny third baseman named Jose Canseco. No other, he wasn't even the scouting bureau. And the A's drafted him as in the 15th round in 1982, and the rest was history. And that came from a scout that Billy Martin hired, Camilo Pascual.
Yeah. He was old school that way. He believed in scouting, and it would be neat to be able to talk to him about this fusion of analytics and scouting, and, you know, where is the perfect mix? Because, you know, you still have to lay eyes on a guy. Mike knows this like crazy. You know, I can watch a guy's arm and say, oh, that elbow's blowing out, that shoulder's going to go. But he may have a terrific spin rate or movement or velocity. But when you watch him at college or high school, and you say, that's not going to last. He's not going to be able to pitch in a 162 game season plus the playoffs. So you have to have both. And it's going to be neat to watch what happens in baseball, because there's so many things going on in baseball right now that are changing all the time. And are the changes good?
Well, you know, that's ironic, because before Billy got there, Mr. Finley had a depleted front office. So his cousin, or Carl, was wore 2 hats. And his secretary had 2 or 3 hats. And then the scouts, he only had 3 of them. 3 scouts. Okay, so when your dad came in and made a scouting system, that was awesome. Okay, because he did not have that prior to that. So for Billy to see that that was a hole that needed to be filled, that was awesome. And again, what you said, look what it produced.
Sure. Well, he hiring Walt Jocketty,
Right.
who comes
Great
in as
man.
Oh,
Great man. Great man.
absolutely. And Walt comes in and he's having to handwrite, type up everybody's contracts.
Right.
He had about 4 or 5 coaches. He had to do all this work. He had no idea that there were so many, things that really hadn't been done, because Finley, and you could say he was cheap or whatever, and there's some truth to that. He was also so damn amazing. He could do most of it himself.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And he had an eye for talent. He knew a ball player when he saw one. Okay, so I guess that compensated for him having a lack of scouts. Because
Absolutely.
once
he
one
had
of those
a-
scouts came in, yeah.
He had a great
Didn't
size.
He knew musicians too. He had MC Hammer on his office.
Right.
Stanley Burrell Jr., right?
Right.
Now that's an amazing story right there. The Burrells, there was 3 brothers that worked in the clubhouse. They all worked in the clubhouse. And how Hammer got his name, Stanley Burrell, who turned out to be MC Hammer. Mr. Finley was coming through the ballpark one day in his limousine, and he sees all these people are outside the ballpark instead of inside the ballpark. So he tells the driver to pull over. He gets out the car and he parks his way through there. And here's this kid dancing and breakdancing on his head. And then he looked at the kid, and he looked like Hank Aaron to him, whose nickname was the Hammer. And that's how
Oh, wow.
MC Hammer came up with the name MC Hammer. How about that?
Really? I didn't know
Made him
that.
the vice president of the team as well. Okay, so he went from being on his knees in the clubhouse to being the vice president of the team. Now, I don't know what his job was there. I don't know. We didn't dispute that. A lot of guys said he was brought on the road to spy on us, but that wasn't it. The kid he learned his way around there, and he became a business acclimated behind that too. His career was very successful. And
Well, Mike, didn't a couple of A's invest in his career? I heard Mike Davis.
Mike Davis, McCaddy, and Murph put the money up for him.
Mitchell Page too.
Mitchell Page too, right? Yeah. So yeah. So that was an awesome investment, to say the least. Yeah. And we're friends right now today. We're still friends, Hammer and I. I have a after school program, and then we throw on Thanksgiving we give away turkeys and meals and stuff. And so I called him up one day, and he literally came out and handed out turkeys to all the people and stuff. He stayed there for about 4 hours. So he turned out to be a true gentleman and a great man. Really did. So to see him come from being 12 years old to what he is now just was an awesome thing. What a progression in life.
I have a question too, just personally interested. It's like when Dave Parker came over to the A's, I was a little bit shocked that he came and that they were interested in him, but he had a huge impact on the team. And I'm just wondering how Billy and what Billy's relationship was with Parker.
Parker,
he
he wasn't. Parker wasn't there when Billy was there. Parker was there when LaRussa was there.
Yeah, Parker.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Later. He came later.
Yeah, he came later.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, what was it like? You know, we talked about in 1979 when the A's drew just under 307,000, and the game on April 17th, 1979, when 653 fans were announced. What was it like when you see this revival and resurrection where in 1981, you guys break the 307,000 mark in the first 11 home dates already in 81? What was that just to see where the A's were in 1979, to see them on top of the baseball world and a pop culture phenomenon in 1981?
You know, that's ironic. You said pop culture phenomenon. Kool and the Gang came out with a record, Celebration.
Right.
And after the game, it was literally the fans stayed there for maybe in half an hour. I mean, they partied. They literally partied in the stands, and that became, it got around the city, and that was just selling tickets just because after the fact of the game we win, they didn't play the celebration until we won, and we were winning a lot. So the fans just loved that. I mean, that was something never seen in baseball, and you'll never see that again. I doubt it very seriously.
Hey, Mike, I want to ask you something about something you'll never see again. It used to drive me crazy. Dwayne Murphy would go back and make an incredible catch, and you didn't know if the ball was over the fence or not. He would just start running back to the infield. He would never show the ball after he'd make these big catches. And I've never seen a player do that ever before or since, except for Dwayne Murphy. Do you know why he would do that? I mean, he was super cool, but he got to the point where you're screwing up the game. You didn't know where the ball was.
You know, that was part of Murph's personality as well. He was very even keeled. Okay, what you saw with Murph is what you get, and a play like that, he just downplayed it to the point where something that great, he made it look like it was nothing. You know, and I guess there was a little suspense. We caught onto it earlier, but I guess to a fan looking at the game, I guess that was quite suspenseful. That Murph, boy, he was a great one. He was one of the best center fielders in ever.
History. Yeah.
I
got a question. I think this is appropriate since Billy had a reputation for, or bringing in, maybe not necessarily playing by the rules. So the question is, what do you think about how Billy would have responded to the Red Sox and Astros scandals of the cheating scandals of last year?
Who is that question for?
Yeah.
I don't know, just to everyone, I think.
I mean, he wouldn't have been quiet.
He wouldn't have been quiet. He wouldn't have been quiet.
He would not have been quiet.
Just like
one thing about Billy, he would just about answer any question you would ask him, and he was a protector of baseball. That's my feeling. He loved the game dearly, and look what it did for him. I mean, scrawny kid from West Berkeley, he didn't hit for power, but he was the smartest guy in the field for the Yankees. And I think he respected the game. I don't know if the game has respected him enough, because there's been a lot of shenanigans, I guess, on his end, turbulence and all that. But believe me, he didn't want to see the game violated. I don't believe that at all. I bet he would have been very outspoken about that.
Yeah, I agree, Dave. I agree with you. I agree.
All I know is my father had a quote one day that said, cheating is as big a part of the game as hot dogs and Cracker Jacks. And I don't know that he would have felt any anger or malice towards these guys trying to steal signs. To be real honest, the Houston Astros were better than everybody else was at stealing signs. So, and they got caught, and they're getting punished for it. Shouldn't we just let it go? I mean, sign stealing's been going on forever. The shot heard around the world, maybe the most famous home run in history. The pitchers in the bullpen were using a telescope. They were using a telescope and waving a towel from the bullpen in the outfield to let Mazeroski know what was coming so he could hit that home run. Is that any different than the cameras and all this other stuff? Oh, it's just more complicated. Let's make it real easy. Let's take all of the electronics. Let's take them out of the dugout, right? Let's do our pregame stuff in the clubhouse, and let's take all that out of the dugout so we don't have to worry about it. Guys don't need to be looking at laptops. They need to be stretching and get ready to play the game. Mike, did you get a look at a laptop before you went out there and faced anybody?
Dude, they didn't even have laptops then. Back then.
Right, we didn't have cell phones. I mean, let's get rid of electronics, and it's not an issue. But sign stealing's been going on forever because those guys were smart enough to take it to a new level. I don't know that we should vilify them. I mean, is that worse than steroids? Is that worse than a lot of other things that's happened in the game?
Good point, Billy. Good point. Good point.
I
think it's just a technology.
My father would steal signs. I know he was always trying to watch that third base coach and see if he could pick something up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a part of the game.
I don't think it's a part. I really don't think it's a part of the game. I think you've got to sometimes protect the players from themselves, from cheating. And I don't know if Billy would have allowed a guy with a microscope shooting through the center field scoreboard, microscope, I mean a telescope, Billy. But if you think that way, then the Black Sox scandal, you just let that happen in 1919. You know, it's different now than then.
No, that's very different. That's an absolutely different thing.
Those 8 players got kicked out of baseball forever.
No,
these guys have a chance
trying to lose.
To come back.
There's a difference in trying to win and trying to lose.
If you're cheating the game, it's going to catch up to you. It caught up to the steroid guys that McGuire and Canseco use the word vilified. They're condemned for life. It's going to be part of them. Who's going to protect them from themselves? I think Hinch didn't do it in Houston. Cora didn't do it. Maybe Billy would have done it. Maybe Billy would have stopped this. From getting out of hand. I give him a lot of credit because I think he would protect the game, and I don't think he'd see cheating of that magnitude as being something that would be good for the game. I really don't.
All I know is, and Mike touched on it earlier, my father wanted to win more than anyone. And is there a real difference in watching a third base coach give his signs with your eyeballs as opposed to a camera? I don't know. But to put that in the same context as the Black Sox scandal, those guys were losing on purpose. That to me isn't anywhere in the same ballpark, because the Astros, these guys were trying to win. Were they trying to do it the right way? No. And they got caught and they got punished. You know, the steroids guys, what they did, was it right? Absolutely not. They got caught. They're being punished in their own different ways. You can take both sides of those arguments, and it's easy, but I know my father tried to steal signs. He was great at it. It was something he was amazing at. He didn't do it. I'm going to say he didn't do that illegally, but because there was no rule, or there wasn't that, there weren't those extra ways to do it. So I don't know. It's such a convoluted thing. It's hard to imagine, because people ask me, would my father have done steroids? And I don't know the answer to that, because he was a 250 hitter. He wouldn't have set any records doing it, but he might have gotten a couple more seasons in, right? He might have made a little more money and gotten a better pension out of the deal. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, you know, guys don't talk about greenies, right, Mike? Remember when there were big boxes of greenies on top of every refrigerator in every locker room?
My first start in the big leagues, I went into my locker to go in my locker, and there was a greenie right on the top shelf. I didn't know who left it, but that was prevalent. For sure.
Absolutely, and that was part of the game.
And the guys would go, "Hey, you want a little help today?" And that was that.
But
I think
Go
the
ahead.
technology is the word for this right now. I think when the technology came into it, that's what made it absurd.
Yep.
And you know, that's just my opinion. And
Well,
I think a lot of people
roll
think
it back.
like that.
Roll it back to Abner Doubleday when he invented baseball. That's, to me, the easiest way. There wasn't this technology, so let's get rid of it. Let's pull it out of the dugout and make guys play the game, right?
Yeah, I agree.
It's easy.
But Billy stole signs from the dugout. He did it on his own because he had the ingenuity to know how to do it. So did Leo DeRocher. So did a lot of managers. But when you invite cheating into the game, you can compare it to steroids. You can compare it to this. You can compare it to that. But who's going to protect the game? I don't think. You know what? I'd give your father credit for knowing when to stop, to tell Canseco, McGuire, you know, you guys are going to get caught. Just like Hinch and Cora could have told Bergman and all those guys, you know, if you get caught, it could screw up your career. Do you want to cheat and ruin your career and be stigmatized forever as cheaters? That's a big load to handle. And, you know, the Black Sox guys, the reason they cheated because Comiskey was a cheap owner and they were trying to make money with the gamblers, and so they threw the World Series. But today's players are making money. It's not like it was back then with penurious owners. And I just really believe, I don't want to stand on the soapbox too much longer. Everybody here could get their own. You should be able to make their own statement about this thing. But those players, I mean, Barry Bonds is going to be stigmatized for the rest of his life. McGuire, Canseco, now Cora, Hinch. It's a big load to handle. I wonder if Billy saw this coming. I'd like to give him credit. I think maybe he'd be smart enough not to let it get too far where his players are going to be stigmatized for the rest of their lives. So I'll get off my own soapbox.
We're going to let Dave have the last word on that because we're getting towards the end of this thing. And we did have a question about, first of all, I really appreciate everybody being part of this. And we did have a question about for Dale about how, if somebody buys the book, how can we get it signed? And I'm wondering maybe if we could bring you back in the flesh, if I can persuade the library to have a live version of this after the COVID thing is over.
Absolutely. Let's do it with the same great panel. You guys are great.
We'll talk about that.
Steve, I want people to know it's a great book. Not because all of us are in it, but I read it, and I think the research that Dale did is just incredible. The writing is superb, and it'd be a great book. Dale's not paying me to say this, but it'd be a great book for people to read, especially during this pandemic when there's no games, and it's a great piece of literature, and I highly recommend it.
Thanks, Dave.
I agree. And
I concur.
That's why I
concur.
wanted to have this panel. So
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Stephen, for making this happen. Appreciate
my
it.
pleasure. It's great to have you. And I hope I hope something comes of this for the long term for Billy too, because I think we're going to have to recognize him as one of the great men in Oakland history for rescuing this ball club.
Absolutely.
And building the future that we have in not only for the A's, but for modern baseball. I think he was a profoundly influential person and a very good person despite his anger.
Steve, can I say one thing? It's Dave Newhouse. Speaking about Billy, I've written a book called The Yankee Way, and it's about the Yankee teams that won 5 consecutive World Series. And there were 49 to 53. There were 8 players who were there the whole time. One guy was left, Charlie Silvera, who when I interviewed him, and he became Billy's coach many places afterwards. They had a great relationship. And the book is supposed to come out sometime this year. Billy's a part of it. But Charlie told me, he said, I would do anything for Billy except maybe go out with him after game. But he said it with a smile. So anyway, thanks for this. Let me make a plug.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks everybody.
Thank you. I had a blast. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll be in touch, Dave.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.